Now, almost everyone's working lives have been affected in some way by the coronavirus pandemic. But when it comes to job losses that it's caused, well, women have suffered disproportionately. Many are now struggling to get back to work. To mark International Women's Day, LinkedIn carried out some research and found that women are still being hired at a lower rate than men. Well, let's find out more from Karen Kimbrough, who is the chief economist at LinkedIn. Just talk us through some of the key points that jumped out from this research, Karen.
Sure, thanks for having me. One of the things that we saw was, of course, at the outset of the pandemic, women's hiring relative to men's actually fell by a couple of percentage points globally across the board. So ranging from UK to Australia, US, Canada, we saw it everywhere. But what we also saw that was interesting was that women's hiring relative to men also had small setbacks every time you saw closures in any particular country. So with every impact of these sort of rolling blackouts or lockdowns of the economies, women's hiring is sort of slowing relative to men's. The good news is that it does tend to recover over time, but it's never a good thing to kind of feel like you have a constant headwind against you as you try to advance in your career.
And who do you think the responsibility lies with for redressing the balance and trying to even things up a bit?
Oh, quite frankly, I think it's responsibility we all bear. I wouldn't put it on anyone's shoulders. I think it's just important to call attention to it. So, for example, there are many things that companies can do. There are things governments can do. For example, here, companies can think about how they attract talent. One of the things that we've noticed in LinkedIn's own research is that when you have job descriptions, for example, that have very gendered language, such as aggressive or, tackle the competition, those kinds of things, women are 44% less likely to apply for those jobs. So having very gendered job descriptions is one way companies can think about, are they doing their part to help attract women in equal parts? I think it's also important for companies to think about how flexible they can make the workplace. And obviously, we're moving towards remote in some phases, or some sectors, but we do see that women particularly prefer remote work or like the flexibility of remote work and are 26% more likely to apply for remote jobs than men. So they're seeking the flexibility. This is no surprise when you think about where women are concentrated. It's typically in industries that provide a little bit more flexibility, like entertainment, travel, retail. Those typically have more flexible schedules. And so women are seeking flexibilities, and companies can do something about that as well.
And then in terms of the fact that the job losses have fallen disproportionately on women, do you think that is simply down to the fact that those sectors that you mentioned, hospitality, tourism, creative sectors, there are perhaps more women in those than other sectors that have fared better, or are there other factors that have resulted in more women losing jobs in the pandemic?
I think there's two factors at play. And of course, I want to state, of course, that the pandemic is affecting all of us. It's painful for everyone. But I think for women in particular, they do bear the brunt of child giving and elder care. And when the government, for very good reasons, has to close down important institutions that are buttressing our society and providing care, then that burden shifts to women. And that's what we want to call attention to. And that is disproportionately, I think, weighing on women in terms of making career choices, which is why they apply less and why they're getting hired at lower rates than they were before relative to men. I also think, however, that it's really important to just realize that women are disproportionately concentrated in certain sectors, to your point. And therefore, as long as those sectors are more affected by the pandemic, women are going to feel this. But the good news, as I would say, is that largely, women and people in general have proven to be very resilient. And we're seeing already recovery every time you have the economies reopen or schools reopen full-time, I might add. It's more important full-time, not part-time, but full-time reopening of schools gives women that flexibility to get back in the job market.
Okay. Karen, we must leave it there. Thank you very much. Karen Kimbrough, chief economist at LinkedIn.